Hi, my name is Alexis Eykel. I am the landlord engagement specialist at Tacoma Housing Authority. Thank you to everybody that is joining us for this webinar today. We are here with our friends Russ and Nancy with the City of Tacoma Fair Housing team, and they are going to talk about steering today. And so I'm going to hand it over to our friends at City of Tacoma.
So thank you, Alexis, for having us here again. And my name is Nancy, and I'm with the City of Tacoma Office of Equity and Human Rights. And I'm here with my partner in crime, Russ. He is our fair housing coordinator and investigator extraordinaire.
Yeah, well.
And so today we will be talking about steering and helping everybody understand better what that looks like. And I just want to give a friendly reminder that we have a few more sessions of our Lunch and Learn. And so these are our upcoming training sessions through October. And if there's any other topics that folks are interested in, feel free to reach out. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation. And if there's anything that you have questions about, or if there's trends you're seeing in the community that you want to talk about, definitely let us know, and we would love to continue to have these. So first, we like to do this every month, is just make sure we have a clear definition about what fair housing is. So fair housing is the right to choose housing free from unlawful discrimination. So we have laws that protect us, federal, state, and local, and all housing transactions. So whether that be rentals, sales, lending, and or insurance. And this is to ensure access for everyone. And it's because we all deserve really to just have the roof that we want over our heads. And so the next thing we like to make sure everybody's aware of is what our protected classes are. So we have our federally protected classes that you can see in the left-hand column. And then in the right-hand column, we have more local protected classes. We have our protected classes for the state of Washington. And then in the city of Tacoma, we have some additional protected classes. I'm not going to read them. Y'all can look through those. And so what we're going to talk about today is steering. And before we talk about steering, we wanted to give a little bit of history. So thinking about kind of why steering is a topic that is important today. So redlining is a action, or it's something that happened back in the early 1900s. And in this slide, you can see there's a map of the city of Tacoma. And this map is actually a red line map that was used back in the 1930s. And we all know that Tacoma is one of the most racially diverse cities in Washington state. And back in the 1930s, it was also diverse. And what we saw, if you look at this map, you can see the sections that are red, and then you can see sections that are blue or green or yellow. And so the idea back in the 1930s was that banks would not loan for properties, or they were more stringent in their loaning requirements in those sections of the city that were highlighted in red. And so red was considered more dangerous areas, like less likely to have repayment of those loans. And those sections of the city were often for people of color or immigrant community, and just pretty much anyone who was not white. And so this is our history and what has happened. And so this is part of why it's really important that we talk about something like steering, because it's similar in nature. It's not quite as overt as redlining was. Like, we don't see these maps up in banks anymore, but it's still something that's happening. Anything to add there? No. Another thing in our history was, and you may have heard of these, but these racially restrictive covenants. So this is something where, there used to be language. And so like for an HOA, right? For like a housing association. And I took the part that's highlighted there in yellow because it's tiny, and just put it in the quotation marks where, it says like, no part or parcel of land or improvement thereon shall be rented or released to or used or occupied in whole or in part by any person of African or Asiatic descent, nor by any person not of the white or Caucasian race, other than domestic servants domiciled with an owner or tenant and living in their home. And so this is the history that we have across the nation, but these are particular, this restrictive covenant and also that map are specific to the Tacoma area. So this was definitely happening here. So now thinking about that history, now thinking about what is actual steering that's happening. And so steering is when a housing provider, or so for example, like a real estate agent or a manager of an apartment or just any housing provider has the capacity and tries to influence someone's choice of a home or an apartment. And that kind of influence is based on that person's protected category. And this is even if it's well-intentioned. So this is what it's really important to understand, that even as a housing provider, you may think you're trying to help that person, but it's just not, it's not appropriate. It's not the right choice when you're offering housing, and that housing should really be determined based only upon the availability and the preference provided by the applicant, unless that preference exhibits some kind of bigotry. So if the client says like they don't want to be housed next to a person of a particular race, like that's of course not okay either. But thinking from the view of the housing provider, it's just really important to be as objective as possible and not use any basis related to a protected class to try to determine where someone should live.
An example, I had an individual call me for technical guidance, had an apartment to rent above a retail establishment. Property was on a busy road, and there were no parks or green space near for children to play in. There was a parking lot. On the way to finish cleaning up the unit, the gentleman saw a dead dog in the street and became worried that if there were children in this unit with no place to play, only in the parking lot, that they would wander out into the street and get hit by a car. So he asked me if it was okay if in the ad for the unit put no children. So as well-intentioned as it might have been, the safety of minor children, when you really stretch out the imagination, anybody can get hit by a car, whether they're 12 or 120. So that's kind of, well, we won't get there. But in any essence, so the discussion I had was to let him know that, okay, as well as intentioned as it might be, the safety of children, if you will, you need to not put that in an ad and allow the applicant to determine whether that environment is one safe for their children.
Mm-hmm.
And if the applicant says, no, we can do this, I'll take my kids to the park, etc., and they want to rent the place, it is their prerogative to do so.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple similar examples. And so the idea is that, so in this particular slide, we talk about race, but any protected class, that idea of limiting a buyer's choice is what is considered steering. And so, for example, like counseling people to only buy or rent in certain neighborhoods or towns based on their rent, or not showing clients relevant homes based on their race, or again, any protected class. And this is something we've seen in the news recently. And so it's something to be really aware of. Like, again, like Russ said, even if it's well-intentioned, it's still considered a fair housing violation, and a complaint could be filed. So some things that are things that, like in practice, that would be considered steering would be showing more listings to white home buyers as opposed to minority home buyers, assuming that someone wants to live in a neighborhood predominated by people of their own race, or discouraging white clients from living in certain areas due to safety reasons, or not disclosing or disclosing neighborhood safety concerns, such as just like a rash of break-ins to white home buyers, but not doing the same with other home buyers, and just in general disparaging communities, minority communities to white clients. So there's different things that we can see, and it's just, again, that idea of like, anytime you're sectioning out a protected class, there's the potential that it could be a fair housing violation. So another example, this is kind of like a scenario, and this is that idea that bias can be unconscious, and it's something that all of us should be thinking about every day, and how bias comes into our own life. And we all have bias, but that's why it's really important to be thinking about it. And so here we have a white buyer and a black buyer who approached the same real estate agent looking to buy a home. Both buyers have similar financial profiles and similar needs. The agent sends the white buyer 40 listings in 5 different communities, all of which are predominantly white. And the agent then sends the black buyer to 22 listings in 3 communities, all of which are racially mixed or predominantly black. And so this is a really clear-cut example that would be considered steering. And so then the question is, like, how would somebody know, right, that they have been steered? And that's something like, we'll get questions from the community like, well, I think this is happening. And then that's where an investigation would happen, right? So we can look into those things and see if housing providers are steering their clients to different sections of town. So here's some other statements. We like to talk about like what not to do, and then we'll talk about best practices. So these are some things, again, thinking that steering can be related to any of the protected classes. So like this idea, like if you have children, you know, that we've had fewer complaints from neighbors if you live on the first floor. Or that there's an area of the property that's viewed as the quiet area, and you should choose to live in a different area closer to the other young families. But if somebody, you know, if there's an open apartment and if they qualify for it, then they should be allowed to process an application for that apartment. Saying things like, I just don't see you as fitting into this community. I'm sure I can find you a different property where you would be more comfortable. I'm not permitted to be a bigot in my work, but if you are, it's fine with me. Just tell me what you're looking for and I'll find it. This property has a lot of Mexican Americans. You should fit right in. And again, like someone may say something like that and be well-intentioned and think that they're trying to be welcoming. But when you're specifying what someone's protected class is, it could be interpreted as steering. So that's why it's important, again, to just stick to the facts, stick to, you know, what is the occupancy of the unit? What is the price for the unit? What are the requirements when it comes to income, so that then you know that they can afford it? Like that's really what things should be based on when determining if somebody qualifies for an apartment, but not any of the other protected classes. You have anything to add?
I just think it's best to err on the side of making decisions based on business related criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Do they make enough money? Do they not make enough money? Not, they have kids, they won't be safe here. They have kids, they'll annoy the neighbors below them because they run around and jump on beds and stuff. That individual happens to cook a lot of ethnic food, and once they cook their ethnic food, the neighbors complain. And I don't want to annoy the neighbors, so maybe they should live in the back, because I've got another couple of families that live back there of the same ethnicity, and they won't complain about any ethnic food being cooked or the spices. And I mean, it can take many different forms, but if you look at business related decisions, then generally speaking, you'll be on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Look at that, Russ just leading us right into our best practices. Thank you, Russ. So then thinking about, again, business practices, right? So providing clients with listings based on their objective criteria alone. And so, and knowing that clients, buyers or, folks looking for apartments, sometimes we'll use vague terms, right? Sometimes they'll say things like, well, we're just looking for a nice, safe place to live. And so then asking them to clarify and saying, well, can you tell me what you mean by that? Like, what exactly are you looking for? And then being really clear that, you're there to provide the housing, and that if they're interested in additional information about the area, that there's lots of places where they can search that out, right? So they can look at the school district website if they want to find out things about the schools in the area. If they're interested in crime rates, they can usually find that on their police department website. So just making sure they know, like, of course, you're going to have questions about the area. And if you're interested in that kind of information, you can, look online and see what you can find. And again, that whole idea of that, we all have biases. And so making sure you pay attention to those and making sure that you're evaluating each client objectively and asking yourself, if you've steered someone, right? Like if you've encouraged them to look at a certain property and eliminated other areas, and make sure that it's based on, again, that whole idea of like, is it for business, right? And not thinking about just what somebody's protected class, when that could come into play. So there is our contact information. Russ, like I said, he's our fair housing coordinator. I'm our outreach specialist. I also speak Spanish. So if you ever have any clients or anyone who's a Spanish speaker and they need any assistance, I can help with that. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any additional questions. And that's our presentation for today.